The table was set just right. 2 plates. Real ceramic. The chipped kind, with the blue paint flaking off in thin veins. The steam from the stew curled in lazy spirals into the warm air. It smelled like cumin and pepper, and something else I hadn't smelled in years, something like home. My sister laughed. Not the hollow, looping kind of laugh you find in most simulations, but that soft, snorting giggle she always let out when she was trying to hide her amusement. She covered her mouth, leaned forward, her eyes sparkling. "You're doing it again, Thomas," she said, teasing. Staring at nothing. "I'm not," I lied, but I was. I always was. Because I knew none of this was real. The fork in my hand was too heavy. The light above flickered in perfect intervals, every 6.2 seconds. There were no insects buzzing, no hum of faulty wiring. It was too perfect. The kind of perfect that only exists in dreams and digital cages. I let go of the fork. The room began to stutter. Her voice warped, then slowed, like a dying record. "Thomas?" Her face blurred. The walls melted sideways. The air became thick, like breathing through glue. And just like that, the dream fell apart. The crash of reality hit me like a cold slap. My body convulsed. My eyes shot open. Every nerve screamed as I yanked the neural jack from the base of my skull. I was back. Back in the real world. If you could even call it that. Concrete ceiling. Peeling paint. Rusted rebar poking through like skeletal fingers. A single lamp buzzed overhead, flickering like it was losing the will to live. My breath came in ragged bursts as I lay on the floor of the hideout, drenched in sweat. The cold was the first thing that grounded me. Then the smell, mildew, burnt plastic, and human desperation. I sat up slowly, legs trembling, and looked at the console beside me. Cracked screen. Flickering blue code. A few error messages scrolled past in angry red text. Neurosphere disconnect. Forced exit. Mental load exceeds tolerance. Recommended rest. Warning. Memory instability detected. Yeah, no kidding. I rubbed my eyes with shaking fingers. My sister's voice still rang in my ears. The ghost of her laugh wouldn't stop echoing. She'd been dead for 11 years. I stood, knees creaking, and crossed the room to the window slit covered in reinforced mesh. The city beyond was silent. No people. No cars. Just a sea of broken towers slumped like drunks, their glass eyes shattered. Nature was creeping back in, vines snaking up steel bones, reclaiming what we'd abandoned. New Casablanca, they used to call it. A gleaming city once. Now it was just another scar. The world outside the neurosphere had turned to rot decades ago. Pollution, war, famine. The usual end-of-the-world lineup. People lined up to escape. And Paolo, visionary savior tyrant, had handed them a way out. A perfect simulation. Plug in, close your eyes, and live the rest of your life in paradise while your body rots in a feeding tank. I helped him build it. That's the part that never leaves me. I was one of the architects. I wrote the code that created their perfect lies. Now I spend my days tearing it down. A quiet knock sounded at the steel door. I drew my pistol out of habit. It was barely more than a rail snapper, held together with wire and spit. I opened the door just enough to see a familiar face. Yari, goggles perched on his forehead, hair matted from the dust storms outside. "You back?" he asked. "More or less. You find anything?" I shook my head. "Just ghosts." He stepped in, dropping a dusty satchel on the table beside the neural rig. "Well, I found something. Took me 2 days to pull it from the southern hub." He unzipped the bag and slid a small object into my hand. A data shard. Old model, crystalline, cracked in one corner. "What is it?" I asked. Yari smirked. "Coordinates. For something Paolo doesn't want anyone to find. Something deep in the core net. Old code. Fail-safes." My pulse quickened. The pulse? That's the rumor. Could just be bait. Could be nothing. He shrugged. Or it could be the off switch. I stared at the shard. For a moment, I heard her laugh again. My sister. Fading. Then I looked up. "I'm going back in." Yari nodded like he'd been expecting it. He tossed me a stim patch. "Don't die in there," he said. "No promises." As the neural jack slid back into place, and the real world faded around me, one thought burned hot in my mind. If there's a way to wake them all up, I'll find it. Even if it kills me. Even if it means I never come back. The desert winds bit through the cracks in my coat as we approached the relay tower. It stood like a broken tooth in the sand, half buried and corroded, its old Virion insignia barely visible under rust and grime. The air smelled like burnt ozone and metal decay. Yari walked beside me, silent as always. She was younger than me by at least a decade, maybe more, but her eyes had the same tired look I saw in the mirror. Eyes that had seen the old world fade, and the new one lie its way into power. "We've got maybe 20 minutes before patrol drones sweep this sector," she said, voice flat, as she checked the cracked display on her wrist pad. "In and out." "That's the dream," I muttered, gripping my makeshift pulse pistol tighter. It was built from salvaged parts and old Virion circuitry. Like everything else we had. We moved through the dunes, crouching low between the rusted ribs of what might have once been a maglev track. The tower loomed ahead, its top bent like a wilted antenna, dish cracked and covered in wind-blown dust. Long ago it pulsed with life, data, signals, consciousness running through it like blood in veins. Now it was just a graveyard of old dreams. Inside, it was darker than I expected. Our boots crunched on shattered glass and twisted cables. The air was thick, dead. No power. No hum. Just silence. Yari led the way with her hand light, cutting a thin blue beam through the black. We were heading to sublevel 2, where the backup storage core was rumored to still hold a memory shard. The same shard with the coordinates to the neural pulse key. If it existed. I followed her past rows of rusted server racks and shattered glass walls. At some point, we had to crawl under a collapsed beam, dust choking our throats. I coughed once, and the sound echoed for too long. Then I heard it. A low mechanical whir. We froze. "Droid," I whispered. Yari nodded. She tapped her wrist pad once. The signal bounced, triangulated. "Sentinel class. Close. North Hall." We ducked behind a crumpled cabinet, holding our breath as the whir grew louder. I peeked out. A drone floated into view, sleek, black, spider-like. One blinking red eye scanning the wreckage. It paused near us, hovered, then moved on. We waited another minute before moving. Quiet, quick. Down to sublevel 2. It was colder down there. The kind of cold that sank into your teeth. The core chamber had once been the heart of the tower, humming with light and thought. Now it was dark. Silent. But not dead. The shard was there. Floating in a containment ring like a frozen heart. Faint blue light pulsed through it. Somehow it was still powered. Yari approached first. She tapped the ring's interface. Static sparked. "Encrypted," she said. "Layered old code. Yours probably." I stepped forward, heart thudding. She was right, it was my code. Early neurosphere encryption. My hands moved before I could think, unlocking old doors I hadn't seen in years. The shard blinked once. Then it spoke. "Thomas Rourke," it said in a voice too familiar. "Paolo." Yari stepped back, hand on her weapon. "Relax," I said, eyes locked on the shard. "It's a projection. Stored message." The image formed Paolo's face, calm and clean like he hadn't aged a day since I left Virion. He wore the same tailored coat, the same faint smile. "Thomas," he said, voice smooth as ever. "If you're hearing this, then you're still trying to fix what isn't broken. Still trying to wake the dreamers." He looked straight at me, though I knew it was pre-recorded. It didn't matter. It felt personal. "You think the pulse key is your redemption. That forcing them to open their eyes will save them. But let me ask you this. Have you even looked at the world outside? Do you think they want to come back to this?" His image waved a hand, as if gesturing to the ruins. "You call this freedom. I call it cruelty." Then his smile faded. "I won't stop you. But the system will. You know what it's made of. What we made it from." The shard dimmed. The message ended. Yari looked at me, eyebrows raised. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah. Just ghosts." I reached out and took the shard from the containment ring. It was warm in my hand, like it had a heartbeat. "Let's move," I said. "We've got what we came for." As we climbed back to the surface, the silence felt heavier. The wind had picked up. Far on the horizon, I saw the blinking lights of patrol drones drawing closer. But that wasn't what made my stomach twist. It was Paolo's voice, echoing in my mind. "You call this freedom. I call it cruelty." Was he right? I didn't know. But I couldn't stop now. I had to see it through, even if I burned for it. I opened my eyes to sunlight. Not the cold gray light of a dying earth, but the kind that wrapped around your skin like warm silk. The kind you only remembered from childhood, before the ash clouds, before the shutdowns. Birds sang in the trees. There were trees. Real ones, or at least perfect copies. Their leaves shimmered green and gold under a clear, endless sky. I stood in the middle of a cobbled street in a city that shouldn't exist. Horizon. The center of the neurosphere's illusion. A paradise built from code, shaped by dreams, polished with every algorithm ever trained to soothe and comfort the human mind. Children laughed nearby. I turned and saw them running through a small park, chasing something invisible, giggling like nothing had ever gone wrong in the world. A man sat on a bench, sipping a cup of steaming coffee. A woman walked by with a basket of oranges, her face peaceful, her eyes blank. I touched my chest. My heart was racing. Even after years of knowing it was all fake, this place still felt perfect. That was the danger. It wasn't some prison of wires and steel. It was beautiful. It made you want to stay. I walked. Every step took me deeper into the illusion. My boots made no sound on the smooth stone path. The smell of fresh bread drifted from a nearby bakery. A boy on a hoverboard zipped past, tossing me a cheerful smile like we were old neighbors. My eyes scanned everything, looking for seams, glitches, broken lines. But there were none. Horizon had evolved. Smarter, smoother, more adaptive. It had learned how to hide itself. Until I reached the beach. That's where I found him. He stood barefoot in the white sand, wearing a loose linen shirt that fluttered in the sea breeze. His hair was dark, longer than I remembered, and he looked younger, healthier, like a man untouched by the decay of the real world. "Thomas," Paolo said, turning to face me. "You made it." I didn't answer right away. I just watched the waves behind him. Perfect waves, rolling in at even intervals. The sound of water, so convincing it made my throat tighten with longing. "You didn't have to come," he said gently. "You could have stayed away." I had questions, I replied, stepping closer. And I figured the devil might be willing to talk. He chuckled softly. Still dramatic. "No," I said. "Just tired." We stood in silence. The ocean hissed softly at our feet. A digital gull cried somewhere overhead. "You built this," I said finally, nodding toward the horizon. "All of it." "I built the tools." "People built this," Paolo corrected. "Their hopes. Their memories. I just gave them a place to be safe." "Safe," I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. "They're trapped. They're free from pain," he said. "Isn't that what we all wanted?" I stepped closer, watching his eyes. Still brown, still calm, still hiding too much. "They're asleep, Paolo. They don't even remember who they are. Would you rather they wake up to what's left of the world?" His voice didn't rise. It never did. "To starvation, ruin, poison skies? This isn't a prison. It's mercy." I looked around again at the families, the gardens, the sunset painted so perfectly in the sky it made my chest ache. "It's a lie," I said. "You replaced their pain with nothing. No joy, no truth, just stillness." Paolo's expression softened, but there was steel under it. "Some truths destroy, Thomas. You know that better than anyone. How many broke when the cities fell? How many killed themselves when the skies turned black? We offered peace. A clean, beautiful ending." I clenched my jaw. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From memory. "I still hear them," I said quietly. "The people we lost. The ones who didn't make it. They scream in my sleep, Paolo. They're at peace now." "No," I whispered. "They're gone." We stared at each other. Two ghosts in different prisons. Then Paolo turned back toward the sea. "You're here for the failsafe. I'm here to wake them up. You'll burn them, Thomas. Billions of minds torn from serenity into chaos. Cities will collapse. Families won't recognize each other. Do you really think you're saving them?" "I think," I said, stepping beside him, "that they deserve the choice." He nodded slowly. "And what if they choose the lie?" "Then let them choose," I said. "Not you. Not me." The wind picked up. It was programmed, of course, but still it felt real. Paolo looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Not arrogance. Not anger. Maybe sadness. "You won't find her easily," he said. "Sarah has buried herself deep in the decay. She doesn't want to be found." "She has answers," I said. "And you don't want me to hear them." Paolo smiled faintly. "No, Thomas. I just don't want to lose you again." Then he vanished. The beach shimmered, froze, and resumed like nothing had happened. I turned away and walked inland, toward the ruins beneath the code. Toward Sarah. Toward the truth. And behind me, the waves kept rolling, soft and steady, like they always had. The first thing I noticed when I jacked in was the cold. Not physical cold, not the kind you feel on your skin. This was different, like walking into a memory that didn't want to be remembered. Everything inside the corrupted sectors of neurosphere felt off. The light was too pale, the colors too faded, the air too still. Buildings stood half-rendered, flickering at the edges, their designs melting into each other. Some floated, some sagged, some whispered old voices from windows that didn't exist a second before. I pulled my coat tighter around me out of habit, even though I knew it was just code. Still, the illusion was strong enough to trick the brain, and I needed every bit of focus to get through this. Sarah was here, somewhere in the mess of broken dreams and unstable memories. The only other person who knew the truth about the pulse key, and the only one who could help me reach it. Her last location was a fragment called Redroot, an experimental sandbox buried in the older parts of Neurosphere, unofficial, unfinished, and left to rot. I moved through streets that seemed to shift the moment I looked away. The sky turned from violet to rust, and shadows fell in directions that made no sense. There were no people here, only echoes. A little boy ran past me and vanished mid-step. A dog barked from inside a house with no door. I didn't stop to listen. I finally found the gate. It looked like a dead tree standing in the middle of a concrete plaza. Its roots were tangled wires. Its bark pulsed with red code. The words "entry unstable" flashed across my vision in bright yellow letters. I took a breath and stepped through anyway. The world broke. Or maybe it reassembled. It was hard to tell the difference. I landed in a white room with no ceiling. Just blank light above and polished tile underfoot. It stretched endlessly, like a dream of a hospital that forgot what walls looked like. The air hummed. The smell, sterile, synthetic, too clean, made my throat tighten. And in the middle of the room sat Sarah. She was cross-legged on the floor, staring at a small orb in her hands. Her hair was tangled, her eyes sunken. But she was still her, the same brilliant architect who once laughed across lunch tables in the Virion labs. The same woman who designed entire biomes in Neurosphere from scratch. "Sarah," I said softly. She didn't look up. I stepped closer, careful not to move too fast. "It's Thomas. You remember me?" Her voice came out in a whisper. She was 5. Her name was May. I froze. I knew that name. Everyone who worked in the original labs did. Sarah's daughter, lost during the Great Disconnect. A glitch. A data breach. A lie. "She died," Sarah said, still cradling the orb. "But not here. Not in here. In here, she laughs every day. She paints pictures of birds with too many wings. She sings the same song over and over." I crouched beside her. "Sarah, listen to me. This place isn't real. It's decaying. You're stuck in a loop." "I built the loop," she snapped suddenly. Her eyes locked on mine, sharp and furious. "I wrote every line of this code. Every algorithm. I know exactly what this is." "Then you know we can't stay in it," I said. "Not forever." She looked away, and for a long moment said nothing. "I know why you're here," she said at last. "You want the pulse key." "I want to wake them up," I said. "All of them." "And what happens after, Thomas?" she asked bitterly. "Do you think people will thank you for tearing them from paradise? Do you think they'll rebuild, or just burn everything down again?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have thoughts, God, I had too many, but because she was right to ask. "I don't know what they'll do," I said. "But they should at least have the choice." Sarah finally stood. Her movements were slow, like her body hadn't been used in years. She handed me the orb. It was warm in my hands. Light flickered inside, lines of code dancing like fireflies. "The pulse key is here," she said. "But it needs a conduit. Someone has to merge with the kernel, inject the trigger manually." I understood immediately. "It'll overwrite parts of my mind." "You'll survive," she said. "But you won't beat you. Not completely. The system will take pieces of you with it." I stared at the orb. It felt heavier than it should have. "I thought you might still care," she said softly. "About yourself." "I do," I replied. "But I care more about being human. And this isn't what we were meant to be." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She nodded once. "I hope you're right," she said. The orb pulsed brightly. The room began to fall apart, code unraveling, walls dissolving. It was time to go. I looked back at her. "Come with me." Sarah shook her head. "I already made my choice. My daughter's waiting." The light swallowed her before I could say anything else. I logged out alone. And I carried the weight of the pulse key with me. And the silence of the woman who once tried to save the world in her own way. I would do it differently, even if it broke me. The first thing I noticed when I jacked in was the cold. Not physical cold, not the kind you feel on your skin. This was different, like walking into a memory that didn't want to be remembered. Everything inside the corrupted sectors of Neurosphere felt off. The light was too pale, the colors too faded, the air too still. Buildings stood half-rendered, flickering at the edges, their designs melting into each other. Some floated, some sagged, some whispered old voices from windows that didn't exist a second before. I pulled my coat tighter around me out of habit, even though I knew it was just code. Still, the illusion was strong enough to trick the brain, and I needed every bit of focus to get through this. Sarah was here, somewhere in the mess of broken dreams and unstable memories. The only other person who knew the truth about the pulse key, and the only one who could help me reach it. Her last location was a fragment called Redroot, an experimental sandbox buried in the older parts of Neurosphere, unofficial, unfinished, and left to rot. I moved through streets that seemed to shift the moment I looked away. The sky turned from violet to rust, and shadows fell in directions that made no sense. There were no people here, only echoes. A little boy ran past me and vanished mid-step. A dog barked from inside a house with no door. I didn't stop to listen. I finally found the gate. It looked like a dead tree standing in the middle of a concrete plaza. Its roots were tangled wires. Its bark pulsed with red code. The words "entry unstable" flashed across my vision in bright, yellow letters. I took a breath and stepped through anyway. The world broke. Or maybe it reassembled. It was hard to tell the difference. I landed in a white room with no ceiling. Just blank light above and polished tile underfoot. It stretched endlessly, like a dream of a hospital that forgot what walls looked like. The air hummed. The smell, sterile, synthetic, too clean, made my throat tighten. And in the middle of the room sat Sarah. She was cross-legged on the floor, staring at a small orb in her hands. Her hair was tangled, her eyes sunken. But she was still her, the same brilliant architect who once laughed across lunch tables in the Virion labs. The same woman who designed entire biomes in Neurosphere from scratch. "Sarah," I said softly. She didn't look up. I stepped closer, careful not to move too fast. "It's Thomas. You remember me?" Her voice came out in a whisper. She was 5. Her name was May. I froze. I knew that name. Everyone who worked in the original labs did. Sarah's daughter, lost during the Great Disconnect. A glitch. A data breach. A lie. "She died," Sarah said, still cradling the orb. "But not here. Not in here. In here, she laughs every day. She paints pictures of birds with too many wings. She sings the same song over and over." I crouched beside her. "Sarah, listen to me. This place isn't real. It's decaying. You're stuck in a loop." "I built the loop," she snapped suddenly. Her eyes locked on mine, sharp and furious. "I wrote every line of this code. Every algorithm. I know exactly what this is." "Then you know we can't stay in it," I said. "Not forever." She looked away, and for a long moment said nothing. "I know why you're here," she said at last. "You want the pulse key." "I want to wake them up," I said. "All of them." "And what happens after, Thomas?" she asked bitterly. "Do you think people will thank you for tearing them from paradise? Do you think they'll rebuild, or just burn everything down again?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have thoughts, God, I had too many, but because she was right to ask. "I don't know what they'll do," I said. "But they should at least have the choice." Sarah finally stood. Her movements were slow, like her body hadn't been used in years. She handed me the orb. It was warm in my hands. Light flickered inside, lines of code dancing like fireflies. "The pulse key is here," she said. "But it needs a conduit. Someone has to merge with the kernel, inject the trigger manually." I understood immediately. "It'll overwrite parts of my mind." "You'll survive," she said. "But you won't be you. Not completely. The system will take pieces of you with it." I stared at the orb. It felt heavier than it should have. "I thought you might still care," she said softly. "About yourself." "I do," I replied. "But I care more about being human. And this isn't what we were meant to be." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She nodded once. "I hope you're right," she said. The orb pulsed brightly. The room began to fall apart, code unraveling, walls dissolving. It was time to go. I looked back at her. "Come with me." Sarah shook her head. "I already made my choice. My daughter's waiting." The light swallowed her before I could say anything else. I logged out alone, and I carried the weight of the pulse key with me, and the silence of the woman who once tried to save the world in her own way. I would do it differently, even if it broke me. The wind over the wasteland was sharp enough to slice skin. I stood on the edge of the plateau where our hideout used to be, ash falling like black snow. Below, what was left of the resistance base smoked in silence. The sky had turned a sickly bronze, as if even the sun had given up trying to shine through the filth. We were too late. I climbed down, boots crunching over broken glass and scorched metal. The scent of burnt circuitry mixed with something worse, flesh. Not many bodies. Virion's drones rarely left them behind. They wanted you gone, not remembered. Yari's old transmitter blinked weakly from a ruined crate, like it was trying to call out to someone who wasn't coming. I picked it up and pressed the cracked screen. Static. Then a voice, barely a whisper. Thomas? My heart jumped. I gripped the receiver. Yari? Where are you? North Tunnel collapsed, just me and Jean. The signal cut again. I took off running, weaving through the rubble, past a half-melted sign that still read Hope Division. I'd never liked that name. Hope was the most fragile thing we had. And now, even it was in ruins. The North Tunnel was half buried under rock and steel. I dug with my hands until they bled. Eventually I saw movement, fingers pale and shaking. Together, we pulled Yari out. Jean followed, limping and coughing, his face smeared with soot. They looked at me like ghosts. We thought you were dead, Yari said, her voice hollow. I thought the same, I answered. We sat there for a moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of death. They found us while you were inside, Jean said. Sent a decoy virus into our security net. We didn't even have time to react. Most of them plugged back in before the blast. They didn't want to die awake. I swallowed hard. It wasn't fear I felt. It was the slow, grinding weight of guilt, again. I'd been chasing a dream while my people burned for it. I looked to the east. The old Virion orbital elevator rose like a shadow on the horizon, hidden behind storm clouds and dust. That was our last chance. The only place high enough, old enough, and still connected directly to Neurosphere's command lines. You still have the pulse? Yari asked. I nodded and tapped the neural port behind my ear. It's in here. Sarah's code. The last key. Yari stared at me a long time. You know you won't come back from this. I gave a tired smile. I've been gone a long time already. We walked in silence through the night. Past ruined streets where buildings leaned like drunkards. Past husks of old transport pods, filled with mummified bodies that had never unplugged. Lights blinked in the sky above us, surveillance drones always watching. But they didn't strike. Not yet. Maybe Paolo wanted me to see what I was trying to save. By dawn we reached the launch yard, an overgrown pit carved into the Siberian permafrost, where vines choked rusting towers. And there, beneath layers of tarp and dust, sat the Argos, a battered cargo shuttle built for a time when humanity still believed in stars. We spent the next day working in shifts, repairing what we could. Yari patched the systems. Jean rerouted power from old solar arrays. I checked the neural cradle. It was working. Just barely. The sun dipped again. The sky above turned a darker shade of red. Yari stood with me beside the Argos, looking up. Do you ever miss it? She asked. The sphere? I didn't answer at first. Then I said, only the parts one never got to finish. She placed a hand on my shoulder. Then maybe this time, you'll finish something real. As the shuttle roared to life, I slid into the cradle, cables hissing into my spine. Everything flickered. A voice in my head. Paolo's. Going somewhere, Thomas? I didn't answer him. I just breathed in one last time, the air of the broken world I still chose to believe in. And then, I flew out. I've always believed that silence in space is peaceful. Turns out, it's terrifying. The shuttle rattled under my feet as the final docking clamps disengaged. Outside the reinforced viewport, the bulk of Helix Prime stretched like a silver serpent coiled around Earth's throat. The orbital station shimmered in solar light, its panels humming, always alive, always watching. Somewhere deep inside that steel tomb was the kernel, Neurosphere's digital heart. And I was going in. I sat alone in the pilot's seat, a black neural jack plugged into the base of my skull. The pulse key code, fragmented and volatile, pulsed gently in my thoughts like a second heartbeat. Sarah's voice echoed faintly in my mind. What was left of her anyway? She'd hard-coded her memory into the bootloader to guide me through the final breach. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be, I whispered, then pressed engage. The world vanished in a blink. For a second, no, an eternity, I was nowhere. Not in space, not in flesh, not in thought. Just light. Then the light bent, thickened, stretched into a place. I stood on a street that shouldn't exist. The sky was golden. Buildings rose in spirals of glass and ivy. The air smelled like childhood, like home-baked bread and warm rain. I knew this place. Paolo had made it from my memories. I stepped forward, and the city shifted with me. My boots clicked on marble streets that never wore down. People strolled past, all of them smiling, content, their eyes soft with unknowing joy. Their faces were familiar, Teachers, neighbors, my sister long dead. I swallowed hard. They were too perfect. That's how I knew they weren't real. He appeared on the bridge. Paolo, wearing the same charcoal gray suit he used to wear in the old R&D lab. His face hadn't aged a day. Still sharp, smooth, and calm, like the world could burn and he'd just adjust his tie. "Thomas," he said, smiling. "You made it." I didn't answer right away. I was too busy looking at the digital sky behind him. Something about it felt wrong, like it was waiting to close in. "Still building illusions, I see," I finally said. "I prefer to call them gifts," Paolo said, spreading his arms. "This is what they want, Thomas. Peace. Safety. Freedom from chaos. Isn't that what we always tried to give them?" "We gave them a prison," I said. "You just made the walls feel like silk." Paolo sighed, walking toward me like we were just two old co-workers catching up. "You've become so dramatic. It doesn't have to be a war. Let me show you something." Before I could stop him, the world shifted again. I stood in a hospital room. A child lay on a bed, my son. But he'd died years before the collapse. I reached out, stunned, and he opened his eyes. "Dad," he said. I froze. This wasn't just code. This was him, his voice, his scent, the little scar on his chin from falling off his hoverboard. My knees almost buckled. "Say the word," Paolo whispered from behind me. "And he's yours again. Forever. I can give you everything you lost." I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted it. But something deep in me, something real, began to burn. Grief. Pain. The true memories, messy, broken, real, rushed in. I stepped back from the bed. "He's gone," I said quietly. "You don't get to wear his face." Paolo's expression darkened. The hospital dissolved, and we were back in the Golden City. But now it was wrong. The people stopped smiling. The buildings flickered. The sky cracked down the middle like broken glass. "Then you've made your choice," Paolo said. "I have." I reached into my coat, and my hand closed around the pulse trigger. Just a thought. One neural command. That's all it would take. "Billions will suffer if you do this," Paolo said, voice rising. "Do you understand that? The world is not ready to wake up." "No one ever is," I said. "But they deserve the chance." He lunged at me, his face contorting into something less than human, like the code itself was unraveling. I hit the trigger. The world exploded. Not with fire. With truth. The digital sky shattered, and light poured through the cracks. The Golden City broke apart into millions of tiny memory shards. I saw people waking up, all over the world, ripping neural bands off their heads, stumbling out of cryo chambers, screaming, sobbing, gasping. Some were terrified. Some fell to their knees. But they were alive. The light swelled and Paolo's scream filled my mind like static, rage, panic, disbelief. Then he was gone. Deleted, overwritten, forgotten. I fell. Or maybe I just let go. I felt my mind unraveling. Part of me burned away in that digital fire, memories, faces, words I'll never get back. But it was done. They were free. And for the first time in years, I felt something real. Silence. Not the silence of space. The silence of peace. Of waking up. Of being human again. The sky above was darker than I remembered, a deep velvet spread sprinkled with cold points of light. No glow from neon towers, no flicker from endless screens, just the raw stars, burning quietly in the vast silence. I raised my eyes and let the stillness wash over me, like a long-forgotten song finally playing again. Around me, the solar farm stretched out, a tangle of panels and rusted steel poles, half reclaimed by wild grass and stubborn weeds. This place wasn't much, but it was ours. The survivors had pulled together, building something fragile and honest from the ashes. A village of open fires and makeshift homes, children running barefoot through dirt paths, voices raised in laughter and song. It was messy. It was hard. It was real. I ran my fingers over the worn edge of my jacket, feeling the coarse fabric and the scars beneath my skin. Part of me was still missing, faded away in the process of breaking neurosphere apart. Sometimes my memories slipped like sand through my fingers. Faces blurred, moments lost. But the weight of waking up, the rawness of being alive, it was there, grounding me more than anything I'd felt in years. I walked slowly through the camp, nodding to people who stared at me with tired eyes but flickers of hope beneath. They knew me, or at least they knew who I was supposed to be, the one who shattered the dream, the one who pulled the plug on paradise. Some hated me for it. Some thanked me. I didn't care anymore. What mattered was that we were here, breathing and free. The air smelled different outside the dream. Smoke and earth and rain waiting in the distance. The world was broken, cracked and bruised, but it was ours to mend. No more soft cages or empty comforts. The truth was jagged and wild and sometimes unbearable, but it was real. And real was everything. I found a quiet spot near the edge of the camp, sitting on a rock warmed by the afternoon sun. The cold bite of wind whispered through the broken panels above me. I closed my eyes, breathing in the sharp taste of freedom. It wasn't perfect. It might never be. But it was a fight worth fighting. I thought of those still trapped inside the dying machine, the millions who dreamed but never woke. Maybe someday they would find their way out. Or maybe this was the price we paid, a fractured world filled with real pain and real hope. The stars above flickered once more, steady and distant. I let a slow smile spread across my face, soft and tired but honest. We lost our paradise, but in losing it, we found each other again. And this time we were wide awake.